Hey guys, Kid here of Burn1 with the Shadowverse Evolved channel, bringing you another deck profile for the Cosmic Mythos meta, this time on Discard Dragon. This list here hasn't changed a whole lot, but it's still a very powerful list to be playing in the current meta, so let's just get right into the deck itself. Alright, so here's the deck. It's pretty standard, not a lot of changes. We'll just go through the list very quickly here. Blazing Breath, super broken 1-drop quick spell. I think we all know that by now. If we hit Overflow, it deals 4 instead of 2. It's just our broken version of Angelic Snipe. Dragon's Nest is a new card addition to the Discard Dragon package and Discard Dragon in general, that is, from the new set Cosmic Mythos. It's a very powerful card. If we don't have a good 1-drop to be playing, or we don't have to worry about our opponent playing anything out on 1, I mean, this is a good card to just drop out, let it sit, wait till our eggs hatch, and then once we hit Overflow, heal 2 and draw a card to help with that consistency, as well as getting some extra health in there against the aggro matchups. Dragon Song Flute, standard in every discard deck for Dragon. This is kind of our engine to consistently get a discard trigger every turn, and the Hellflame Dragon tokens are pretty strong overall. Obviously, a lot of times we plan to Dragon Oracle on 2 and play this on 4 with the extra 3 play points to get the Hellflame Dragon token out with the draw as well. Dragon Tamer is back. We have more targets now that are worth discarding, so when we open up inconsistently, Dragon Tamer on 2 doesn't feel that bad if we don't have Dragon Oracle at all, because we have now Dragon Newt Fist, which is a new card that we can discard that goes to our EX area instead of the discard pile. And that way we can reuse this spell later to help control the board early on. It also acts as a very good removal on turn 2 if we didn't draw into any other good 2-drops to be presenting to the board, and we need to remove something on the board in aggro matchups in, like, for example, Sword. We only play one of the Dragon Tamer Evo, mostly for the fact that it gets rush, and sometimes maybe to discard a card thing will come up. The only real target we have is Shenlong, so it won't come up too often for its effect. It's mostly there for I need an Evo to get 3 damage rush in during this turn to help control the board. Shapeshifting Mage is back as well. This is an old staple from set 1, obviously. Not only is the Overflow effect very good, but right now there are some turns against Elephant Forest where if they high roll into the turn 2 5/5, this is how we get rid of it. As well as if we're playing, for example, against Abyss and they Death's Breath back in Israfil, this is a very cheap way to remove the Israfil and still build up a board behind that, because it essentially only costs us 3 play points or 2 play points and an Evo point. We play 2 of the Shapeshifting Mage Evo because we want that to sell in Bane for removal, which is the big important part. And later in the game, obviously having 2-drop 5/5 just still feels pretty solid overall. Dragon Oracle is a 3 of. I mean, what's not surprising about this card, obviously. We want to ramp all the time when possible. It's just ramping is good. Like I said earlier, Dragon Newt Fist is a new card that when we discard it, we put it into our EX area so we can play it again later. Essentially not discarding a card for some of our discard effects, which is good, and also having a little bit extra board control, especially against the aggro matchups, to remove some things off the board feels good. The only sad part about this card, it doesn't have quick. It has to be cast at like a sorcery speed essentially, so you can only play it on your main phase or during your turn, that is. Discard deck, 12 Light. We're going to be discarding, so we might as well get extra draws for discarding. Serpent's Wrath, once again, this is more answers for early 5-drops that our opponent, or 5 health things our opponent will play out early on against things like I said, Elephant Forest, for example. If they high roll turn 2, we have like 6 answers in the deck. As well as late game, this is still a very strong card. Being able to draw a card and remove something off the board. It's at quick speed. A lot of times we won't be using a lot of our play points in the later turns, depending how much we've ramped so far. Card is solid overall. I mean, who doesn't want to remove something and draw a card? Dracomancer's Rites. This is kind of how we slowly ping away at our opponent. Also provides some extra healing if we really want to use the effect for healing. So on play, we get to discard a card if we want to heal 1. Though a lot of times you probably won't be doing that unless you have a good reason to be doing that. Otherwise, at the start of your end phase, you're able, if you discarded a card that turn, you're able to deal 2 damage to either a follower or the enemy leader, which is very solid. As soon as we start presenting Dracomancer's Rites onto the board, that means our opponent is now on a clock to end the game sooner rather than later, because as the game goes on longer and longer and longer, we should win more often than not, because we're going to be able to ping 2 damage minimum every turn as long as Dracomancer's Rites is on the board, and still developing a board behind this as well. Dark Dragoon Forte, we play 3/2 Evo. I mean, who doesn't want a 7/3 Storm Aura in their deck? That's all I really need to say, honestly. Next here, Shenlong as the 1-of. Obviously, it was restricted. If we could play this as the 3-of, we would. It would be busted. On play, draw 2, discard 1. This activates all our discard effects, as well as building up some hand. And when we discard 12 Light and other things like that, it's essentially just a straight up draw 2. Card is really good. We play 1 of the Evo. Evo, obviously super powerful, healing 5 to our leader on Evo, which is really, really good. If you want, you could cut and carrot from the Evo deck and play a second Shenlong Evo if you want to be cheeky to get more value out of Dragon Tamer's Evo itself, because Shenlong is really our only target. So if we play Shenlong out on 5 because we're in an aggro matchup, we don't get the opportunity to Evo Shenlong. That means later turns we can Dragon Tamer Evo, get Shenlong back, and then Evo it later on as well. Or if we play Shenlong out, Evo, and it gets removed, we could Dragon Tamer, bring Shenlong back, and then Evo it again for another heal 5, which is quite annoying. And honestly, in the current meta, maybe you want to be doing something like that, though I prefer to just have the 4 carrots to have more wide removal, because a lot of times our issue is aggressive decks like Hero Sword. So sometimes you will have to use a carrot to just play Ogiri Cap, race it only once, and swing in to kind of clear up the board with its strike effect. Conflag, once again, one of our big weaknesses for Discard Dragon and Dragon in general is that a lot of our payoff is towards the later half of the game. So Conflag is a good way to reset the board itself and then, actually pressure our opponent. So if our opponent overextends early on with Hero Sword and they have like no hand size now, we remove their board with Conflag, and then kind of for the rest of the game, they're basically top decking for the rest of the game. We want to see Conflag at some point. Worst case scenario, later in the game, we just discard Conflags if we don't need them to our Dragon Song Flutes to get Hellflame Dragons onto the board. Ogiri Cap is how we finish all our games. Obviously, this is why we play 4 carrots. We're trying to get to the point later in the game that once we develop Dracomancer's Rites, like 1 or 2 of them onto the board, Ogiri Cap constantly threatens a ton of damage, especially if we get to 9 play points and we're able to play this out on 9, discard 2 cards from our hand to give it Storm. It becomes a 10-7, which is insane. We swing in for the 10 immediately, strike damage deals 3 damage to the board, and then we, end of turn, get to deal 2 extra damage times the number of rights we have on the board. So a lot of times when this is swinging in at 3 racing, it is swinging in for 12 plus damage a lot of the times, which is very, very big and is all out of hand damage essentially. So your opponent has to deal with it a lot. You do have to be careful, especially into matchups like Rune. If you watch our last deck profile video, Rune will be running a lot of Rhyme Winds to answer things like Elephant and Ogiri Cap. So you don't want to accidentally play into that. You need to avoid that if possible. Otherwise, Ogiri Cap closes out games insanely well. It's just a very powerful card overall for the discard package, because it not only does it push a lot of damage, it also activates a lot of our discard effects because we have to discard for the Storm effect. Finally, we play 1 of Riko Kashimoto. This card is very powerful overall. Once again, it's a not bad on 6 play, especially after you Conflag and say your opponent in response, like Israfil's plays an Israfil with Death's Breath, for example, into Abyss. That's what I was looking for there. Riko can just get rid of it fairly easily as long as you're able to swing in, because a lot of times when they do bring out like Israfil, 10-10 is really hard to deal with. But a lot of times they'll Evo it immediately to just like swing in or whatever. This is a easy way to get rid of an Israfil on the board, something that's really hard to remove, as well as pushing some extra damage to your opponent. If you don't like some other card in this list, like say if you don't like having the 3 of Conflag, I do recommend playing like a second Riko. Just having Rico on 6 feels very, very powerful, especially even in the mirror match, for example. It's just a good card overall. At the end, like I said, we did play 4 carrots. I think having the 4th carrot is pretty good on some turns where you have to Ogiri Cap early with one of your Ogiri Caps to clear up the board a little bit for its strike effect, because when it attacks, it will deal 3 damage to the enemy board. Sometimes you just have to do that to be able to stabilize, and then after that you can stabilize and usually win the game from there. But yeah, I mean, the list is super standard overall. There's can be some spicy stuff you could be playing in here, like Prime Dragon Keeper is an interesting card that combos very well with Flute. You could try that as well, along with I'm forgetting the name of the card right now, but it's the Phoenix that comes back to the board. That's another good card. Instead of playing, for example, Shapeshifting Mage, you can play that as a 3-of with 3 of its Evo instead and cut a carrot. That way, whenever you like Serpent's Wrath something away, you could pay 1 more to bring back the 2/2, pay 1 to Evo it, and swinging with a 4 that has a strike effect to deal 2 damage to something, which is also a very powerful effect and a good way to like recycle cards that way. Especially if you're not a fan of Dragon Newt Fist here, that's another pretty solid card to swap this card out for. If you feel like paying the extra play point to get the Phoenix out is good for you. The only way I would recommend that though is that you have to be able to fit 3 of the Evo in the Evo deck, because you can play that card out a lot of times throughout the game, because you can naturally cast a lot of spells on your own turn, like Blazing Breath, for example. Pay 1 more, you get a 2/2 along with your Blazing Breath. Dragon Oracle, for example, pay 1 more, you get a 2/2 with Dragon Oracle, and that can Evo into a 4/4 that deals 2 damage to something. You just have a lot of very good spells you don't mind playing to also pull out an extra card from your grave. Yeah, with that being said, everyone, this is the deck itself. Let me know what you guys think of Dragon Discard in this meta. I'm kind of all over the place on how good Dragon Discard is nowadays. I know it kind of comes and goes depending on how the meta feels and whether it gets new support or not. So I'm interested to see what other people are playing for Discard Dragons, so let me know in the comments below. Other than that, we hope to see you guys in our next video. Later.